the Metro Cafe, the home of poetry, one of the many homes. Word Forge being another of those homes, and I think there's a reading on the 12th of December there, which is Jenny Low-Connors and Sherry Bedingfield, reading about witches, among other things, I think. Does anybody have another announcement of an event of note or not? Nope. Coming up? Okay. There are lots of places to find what's going on in the poetry world. The Antrim House website being one of them. Jim Finnegan sends out all sorts of announcements periodically, as does Lena Trentham. So there's quite a lot of information available. We are still mourning Lonnie Black, and many of us were at a wonderful ceremony in his honor at Real Artways recently. Among the people there was Abu Alvin Carter on drums, I'm calling them Saints Lonnie and Abu. And just to refresh our communal memory, because so many of us were there, I'd like to read a little thing that I have written about that event, which I'm rather pleased with the epigraph of this poem. It says, after the rigged election, and the rigged in a way that Donald Trump didn't expect. And the title of this poem is Outside In. The folk vote to wall others out, themselves in. And today I wake to a different dawn, and the sound of a red-bellied woodpecker hammering a clapboard outside my window. Come in, is what the drumming says to red squirrels. Bad bird. But something in me agrees with it, loves a wall being pickaxed apart. Think jubilant German youth in '89. My platform has this one plank: let outsiders in. I go back to last night's huddle of poets feasting on stories of our dear departed saintly Lonnie. That other among us, we take him in. For him, his friend Abu's drums drum, the drummer's hands blurring on the taut goat skin, palms, knuckles, fingertips, calloused hand heels, saying, come in, come in. Abu admits us all, outsiders, to the circle of his drums on the wide savanna of our common past. Wish we had Abu here, what a drummer he is, and what a man Lonnie was. And they are with us, of course, whether they're here or not. John Stanidis is going to say some good words to you now, and John?
Well, welcome everybody. We certainly miss Katie, false on Randy and me, and so here we are. Just a couple of brief things. The Connecticut Forest and Park Association's New England Trail Poet in Residence kickoff event happens on November 29th, and we're very fortunate to have that poet in residence here with us, David Leff. It's quite an honor, and in fact, that evening there'll be a poetry reading which will include Rennie and me, and Amy Naraki, and of course David. So that's November 29th at the CFPA headquarters in Meriden Road in Rock Fall, Connecticut at 7 o'clock. Okay, and then this is the last reading of the year, and then we resume in January with Joanne Bauer and Pat Matola. In February, Afa Weaver and Liz Acevedo. In March, Kieran Berry and Danielle Pirati. In April, I don't know what they have up their sleeves, but Kate Russian and Nat Reeves will be here. Nat is a wonderful bass player, and you all know Kate's work. And then also in April, which is Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Month, Amy Naraki, Joan Seeliger, Sydney Elizabeth Thomas, and Faith Vicinanza will be here for doing a reading to benefit multiple sclerosis. And then in May, Bruce Cohen, Lynn Houston, and in June, which is a lovely thought, Tony Fusco. Okay, so what we usually do is feature a young poet, and today will be no different. Our young poet today comes to us from Rockville High School, where she is a junior, and she's a student of our friend and poet and teacher extraordinaire, Vicki Nordland. Vicki is actually up for Connecticut Teacher of the Year. What? She didn't. Vicki won the oh my gosh, so Rockville High School, Vicki Nordland is the Connecticut Teacher of the Year. I didn't know that. That's phenomenal. Kim began writing poems when she was 7 years old, but she began in earnest as a freshman at Rockville High School, and so I am very happy and grateful to present to you Kimberly McGuire.
So in Miss Nordland's class, well, Victoria Nordland, as she's known to you guys, we do a lot of structured poetry. So she'll give us starters, or she'll give us a topic or some sort of assignment, and then we have to write poems based on that. So I have 3 poems, and all of them were kind of given to me as things that I needed to write for her. So the first one is called Lucy della Sita, which is Italian. It was like Tuscany lights on the first night it rained. It came down in sheets, and she had told him she would be something more than what had come served on a plate. Single-threaded silk, Japanese prints carved on stale wood too old to remember. She remembered when he said he would forget and pretend like he cared, so she left. She left. She left footstep imprints on old carpet rugs and letter openers left hanging on trim mold finishes too old to remember, too young to give up. She saw faces in the vases that looked a little bit too much like him. So she wrote the pain away in mirrors painted oxblood hues and told him she was leaving. She left everything behind. She left memories of picking grapes off of telephone vines, her mother whispering love like it was meant to be somebody. She said, I'm home, in Florence storms and waves that could swallow whatever she thought she was feeling. She wanted it to. And so she said she was leaving, and she left. And when she came to, the private papers of Henry Rycroft was still placed precariously on ivory stone tables. It had been too long to remember. She didn't choose this world, but it was the one she found herself in, and she said, I'm home, and it was too soon to forget. So this next one it's a little raw, if you would so please. I mean, it talks about PTSD, so I'm just putting that out there. This one is called Stories from the Morning. I hadn't seen him in 6 months. And the first time I sat down at the dining table, he told me that he wouldn't be around for the 4th of July. He had gotten sick of hiding under the stairwell, throwing up into the bucket he used for bird feeder because that was all he could find fast enough. He had forgotten they were scheduled for 6 and spent the night writhing on a cold floor alone because I wouldn't be there until the following day. We sat across a coffee table at 3 a.m, sipping tea that he said reminded him of Vietnam and all the things he had tried to forget. He went on about the fireworks over there that would light up the sky, but he said it must have scared people so much because they were running, and excitement must kill because people dropped like the fruit flies he would pick away from his dinner at night. He told me about Patricia, the nurse that sewed his heart back together when he couldn't do it himself. They married under another lighted sky. but he came home alone. It was a rock concert, he explained. Everything was so loud, and then it all went quiet, and nobody had asked for an encore. Dad, I said quietly, Mom never went with you. No, of course not. She wasn't at the concert. She wasn't at the concert, and she wasn't here now. We assumed she had gotten lost in the crowd. Tea eventually turned into coffee, because we needed something stronger to push back the demons past breakfast at 3 a.m. The sun, he said, looking out the window. It was always so bright. Not here, I corrected. Here it's always dark. I know. He looked down into his creamy remains. He didn't drink it black anymore. It reminded him of the first man that had caught one of his own fireworks. It was so loud. I miss it, he said. I miss the fireworks. Then stay, Dad. Stay and enjoy the fireworks. Too many, he whispers. Too many. Too many stories over morning dew and remembering what it was like to see a little black boy become paint on the sand. I ask him if he wants to go home. No, he says. She doesn't need me anymore. So my last one. When I was in 8th grade, the Vernon Schools actually offers a trip to Bermuda, run through the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences, and I went on it. It was one of the best experiences of my entire life, and I wrote this last poem about Bermuda. So it's called Cahao, which is, the cahows are an endangered species of bird that live on Bermuda. St. George exists on the precipice of the world. The scorched grasses rise up from the earth in between the resurrected palm trees I swore I had seen in Florida. There's a small cathedral, squared away in the midst of a Christian graveyard holding heroes and paupers, names that nobody's uttered since the British rose up their bayonets and took leave back to London. Yet Orthodox lances still laid on them, and they dubbed Bermuda, and maiden bore child here for centuries until the New World caught wind of a Jerusalem much closer to home. The frontiers of a booming business settled its roots into the rocky soil of a coral reef turned haven. Girls strutting in half-decence on the land stuck up with a for sale sign, painted in the blood of their forefathers. I don't think the Old Testament mentioned conquer as painting Venetian sunsets gray and turning the gleaming waters ashen. I imagine syllables spoken in Esperanto, mumbled between the parched lips of Jamaicans who had settled into mud hut homes here so long ago. Come to St. George, where the wine is whiter than our invaders and the topic of conversation is money. Dark pigmentation dyed lighter shades of a new revolution. We all live in harmony, finding every grain of sand on this island and calling it ours. How many encores do we demand before every note has been squeezed out from the shores? I don't think I've ever seen water this clear, or burdocks this vibrant. Color this small slice of the world brown, so that it may match the soil I once stood in. Yet, I am sorry. I take my paradise golden. Thank you.
Kimberly Maguire from Rockville High School. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you so much. I could never get over how people 16 and 17 years old get to those places. It's always remarkable to me. It's awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm very pleased to introduce you Richard Deming. Richard is a poet and theorist whose work explores the intersections of poetry, philosophy, and visual culture. His collections of poems, Let's Not Call It Consequence, received the 2009 Norma Farber Award from the Poetry Society of America. His new book of poetry, Day for Night, appeared this past spring from Shearsman. Richard is the author of Listening to All Sides, Toward an Emersonian Ethics of Reading, and has contributed to such magazines as Art Forum, Sight and Sound, and the Boston Review. And also his poems have appeared in such places as Iowa Review, Field, American Letters, and Commentary in the Nation, which he teaches at Yale, where he is the director of creative writing. Richard Bennett.
Hi guys. After Rilke. Once the summer seemed an unending and unspoken utterance, but now it lays shadows across sundials, and the wind steps from the field grass. Your throat, because of the slow pollen, begins to close, and the voice is no longer recognizably your own. In the arbor, last fruits swell and bend their branches. The sun offers a final few days of light before hurrying apples and grapes to one more ripening, and then one day soon the sweetness of heavy wine. It's time. Whoever now has no home will build no more, as things will become other things, like a translation that forgets, word for pallid word, how rivers flow only one way. Whoever is now alone will remain so, and being alone will wake each day into a dread quiet. Sometimes the eyes open in a foreign place, and to read or write long letters is a geometry for sleeplessly wandering streets and alleyways late into the evening as leaves rasp across asphalt. The weather almost. It's supposed to snow tomorrow, so the weather's kind of on my mind. The weather almost. In a room upstairs, a light flickers, then catches. A woman rehearses the smallest glances, her voice breaking almost to song. Eyes size up the weight of boxes, books, and pages, of chipped plates and cold chicken, and of the beloved's head turned toward a distant thought. The throat thickens, naming off losses, absence. The door of a house near the ocean remains locked and double-bolted. What bears its proximity? A fireplace is filled with October ashes. Grapes of the late season tear or burst, yet the sugared ache of autumn fruit carries the mouth, you can now believe, through the dawn and its early frost. Waiting, say it so, because it becomes a penitent wakefulness. What else can account our attention? The face, that endless city, one knows no other. Whether or not. Then this. The house burns with a kind of panic. Flames claim its heavy drapes. The banisters, soot-blackened porcelain cups strewn across the landing. Actions coin in an incontestable end. This, then, an antic landscape, and above this, then, the sun is blindsided by a day-glow frisbee. Come back now, come back to me on a gray day. Voice is a lethargy. Though I meant to say litany, didn't I? A meaningful slip, or what some then might call anger, I blink. And the morning weatherman with perfect teeth says all conditions are thereby subject to change. And you, Judas Iscariot, brother to shatterings uncountable, the grasses in the field are covered with ice. Your dawn is unlike any others. This then is an eye, a center, the lake, what's subject to sudden loss. And where is my own pale Virgil, who once turned away from the tangled woods toward the wide river, every drop a forgiving, forgetful gesture? My name is a hollow boat, speak it, then vanish. Pentecost. Afternoon is a Ouija board, pointing yes or no, then on their own letters form some address. Of friends, perhaps, one flown somewhere across the sea. A phone rings and rings and rings. The air fills with pollen and the new leaves of linden trees. And when the lake is a vague blue and the sailboat's almost inconsolably happy, when the sunlight's so relentlessly itself, nothing either moves or vanishes, when the small voice of a mourning dove empties into the landscape, falling through space for hours and hours, who's to say there will be no going back? or second thoughts. Oranges on the table, water in the kettle. Still, it's a surprise to find oneself each day waking up in a room with windows, with a door or two, because it could be otherwise. Strange that it is not strange when it could be we wake, each of us singly arrived, with eyes open, at some other place, another moment. But honestly, all moments are another, even now and then, again, now. For how long am I a certain shape of space, the sun above it all, behind slate roofs and rusted gutters, past those few clouds, and night on its way? I look east. So, here's the thing. Check 111. Mic check.
Wait a second, I've got to get him to turn that fan off.
Oh, okay.
Hard to hear.
My fans usually are.
Do you mind if we applaud?
If you want.
I feel like
I'd leave it to the room. Fair enough. So usually I try to be funny because my poems are really kind of bleak and but frankly in the last 2 weeks I haven't felt very funny. And in fact, I kind of started with, I think, the quieter poems, and I want to go into some that I think are a little more like kind of where I'm at. This is a, how you call, prose poem sequence. There are 3 sections of it. All 3 are, they're ekphrastic poems. They're poems that are about, there's one per film, about 3 different horror movies. The first one is Night of the Living Dead by George Romero. The second one is Audition by Takashi Miike, a Japanese film. We got a fan on the back, good man. And the third one is Evil Dead by Sam Raimi. And I think, hopefully, within the prose poems, there's enough narrative that if you don't know those, you're fine, and that was my hope. But if you know them, then you'll catch the references. But there's a kind of, I don't know, anger to them, which I like. And so they're called Film Threat. 1. The survivors barricade a bay window with plywood, an old armoire, an empty refrigerator, and it is dark enough within to read by candlelight. Through a crack you can see 2 eyes and a mouth in shadow and a night filled with intent, glittering teeth. What the image tells us, that the hunger of the zombie, however slow, does not sleep, that the cottage and everyone in it is surrounded by rage, and inside no one will admit the possibility of cowardice aloud, even as the wine is decanted, the cream sauce simmers, and Mendelssohn plays on a stereo somewhere in the background. But maybe we have it wrong. The dead do not hate the living. Love hates the dead for being dead, and again summons them back. One day and soon the boards will come down and the zombies will break in and devour everything in their path, and yet someone will raise a shotgun and shoot the beloved who is no longer the beloved but something else, some other wanton form that wears a recognizable face, and someone in the audience will wonder if that is how we are meant to survive our memories. 2. If a black phone sits on an apartment floor, then a middle-aged widower will surprise himself placing a call, and then he's been alone for 7 years. Then, on the other side of the city, another phone will ring 9 times, each a small and reasonable amount of faith. Then, on the other end, a shy, beautiful woman with black hair will answer. If she answers, then she is dressed all in white and kneels on the floor. Then she will tell him with her quiet and open voice, she is surprised that he would call. Then her head hangs down as she speaks, her long hair covering her face almost completely. If there are no windows where she is, then she does not yet know he has already lied to her out of his sadness. Then he does not know she has been kneeling alone for hours. Then they will make plans to meet for dinner, and then she will smile and she will hang up the receiver. Then he will be relieved and excited, and so then, in the room just beyond the black phone, a body inside a canvas bag, cinched closed, suddenly struggles one last moment, then stops. If so, and knowing we know that, we do not avert our eyes, do not stop listening, then there are such terrible, such familiar thirsts. These do not hide for long, no matter how white a dress may be, or how many times a phone might ring, and so it cannot end well. 3. What is it we don't do well enough that we're constantly afraid? For the insomniac, night is a book that will not stop letting itself be read. Now it's too late. A young couple, beautiful but not too bright, arrives in a yellow Oldsmobile. And when some uninvited rage rushes towards the door, anyone else would know not to open it. There will be a botched incantation and someone won't survive because the words went wrong. In an empty room in the coldest shadows of some forgotten house, an older man's voice echoes on a reel-to-reel. He is a disappointed father who tells a secret history over and over, and who once, long ago, was rent asunder by voices in an empty cellar. Remember me. Startled anew, don't ask why it's always like this. You already foresee an answer with bared teeth. And those hungers beneath the stairs will not close their eyes. Each of us a small, nearly forgotten body, spinning and falling like a long kiss or a bad dream or the sound of celluloid catching fire. The Last of New England. And this is, I don't think you need to know this, but maybe it's useful. There's a Derek Jarman film called The Last of England, which is, it was made in or post-Thatcherite England. And as someone who's a native New Englander from Boston, and actually my ancestors spring from Wethersfield. The first Demings are from Wethersfield. And so I have a sense of the changing New England, and of course now there's a different feel at post-election. The Last of New England. A curtain and faint diffused light. Begin here. The phone rings and someone is listening, and some cold voice articulates an autumn day as homesickness tightens ligature or bond, and then the blood, and then the bone. Where is the world that built me, fashioned the knot of affection and doubt behind my left iris? On the desk beneath the window is a leather book, a paperclip, the photo of a beard singer leaning his head against the wall of some bordered tenement. He does not look at the camera, while at his lip the cigarette's ashen filter is the open mouth of a September morning. These lead me back to where, in unpainted rooms with wooden chairs, we learn slow hymns and plaintive uncertainties to weave a present tense out of so much loss. Dispatches from the coast. Fatigue is a river. The Merrimack, Charles conquered Connecticut Housatonic, each one an inter alia of reckoning that breaks for the sea and some last best wish. Inside an apartment, place your face against cool kitchen tiles, black and white, cracked toward the direction of the fault lines that keep the widow awake and pacing the roof. Can she see the milk-white sin beyond all reason? In any given direction, a mast, a merry pole, a charred smokestack, remote and without shadow, there's always a way into a house. The calendar reads X and X and X and O. I want to say sky, say table, say tomorrow and last week, to voice some Lenten contentment, the odd orison of strength and retreat, but some days the arch of the left hand sustains a paltry curse against half-closed doors. The arm of a corpse catches on the branches along the riverbank. The lastly shore looms close by, and the words you sent and the frosty torchlight passes over the back alley where the ransom tree counts out scars and debts. There's no green like that green, which is not to say the day and all it resolves. And sand and mortar and dread and tar and leaves. The junky tattoos on her cheek and S, the first letter among the last days of the telling noise of slipping out. Mechanisms for counting up the size of minor solace. I love the cost of small talk. It's shallow, opening up to a life of sundry atonement. The factory closes, and months later, dozens of dried chicken legs, all torn at the knuckle, hang from twine in the slow heat. If there is a loneliness yet to be owned, to be earned from wages of the half-intended chance of belonging, spin the girl in the silken dress until the credits roll. So I'll just read, I think, a couple more. One short, one longer. Anger analog. Wow, I'm a good time today. Sorry about this. There you go. Anger analog. When you dreamed the dream of the tree ablaze, the blackbirds ignited one by one, their wings iridescent in a sickening light. And the truth is that truth speaks in so many sullen ways. Blind rage begets a blank trouble. In the song, the birds are still falling. There is nothing there to stop them. Smoke, they say, gets in your eyes. And despite all understanding, you want the wanting, comfortable as a name, familiar as a white scar across the knuckle. I place my hand upon your wrist and place your wrist upon the table. See, that's the one that's going to keep me up all night. So this is a longer one, it refers to the Battle of Thermopylae. If you saw the movie 300, that's really all you need to know about it, which was the Spartans holding off this very narrow pass of a hardy band of 300, the Persian army, which has become became a kind of important, iconic battle that was at the heart of a lot of thinking about what America could be, or the democracies. I get interested in I guess not the way the narrative works, which is that you can be thinking of all the dumb pop culture stuff that comes into your mind, and also thinking about ancient Greek battles at the same time, and watching the news, and all these things become blurred and form one another. And this is sort of one of those moments when I was thinking about, I was watching the news, and we had the news on, and a friend actually said the title of the poem as a question to me, and started reading. And so the news and commercials and his reading from Herodotus was coming through. Shall I read from the battle of the? Shall I read from the history of the Battle of Thermopylae? Now that there is nothing left, for instance, the taste of fear dries the upper lip. Wood doves rustle coppery wings along city gates. What I want is to not want. Not you, not the scent of mango, not the livid faces of fashion models, their necks arching perversely upward, not a single moment. The cigarette smoke's shapes augur 30 mornings of fraught silences, cold tea, the flickering callousness of morning, talk shows, and an empty table set for 3. For you, for me, for the polite ghost of intensest manners. At Quince, no one will eat rolls behind a stove cold to the touch. When things go bad, it gets like this. Where's the gift of sudden continuity? The field of middle ground is dry, sepia-colored cornstalks strewn all around, pointing a given direction. Sing out the measure of a narrow pass. I've been lost here before. with thumb and forefinger blot out the sun, pilgrim, so as not to turn my back, trembling, shine toward the unspeakably insistent. With the lights out, it's not so far. In the movies, it's called Day for Night, and I will open my eyes to a shadow cut in the shape of your mouth, in the pattern of 10 stars and 3,000 times 3,000 pearly eyes of gutted mackerel. The map home is a logic of longitude and shame. What if you were a Persian king, cinders covering your forehead, your eyelashes, your scarred right cheek? How would you arrive across a trail of broken leaves, mercury poisoning the ocean's systemic threat and verdict? Would you take the shore borne aloft on a dozen strong backs? And when articles of faith fashion a loosened garment, the disheveled will not return. In the days before now, before one stretched so wide round us, I wanted a direct address, and something else I wanted to say, and yet I do not know how to ask for fresh water, for a ripened date, for 3 pomegranate seeds. On the last night of the sordid republic, a soldier's wife waves goodbye as the right nipple thickens in the cold, pressing itself against her blue t-shirt. A bright proximity is a wrong kind of silence. In the garden of her unregenerate narrative, see words but think arrows darkening the sky. For the unseen, read loss. For every comma, reckon the ways resentment can pierce the sternum in half. A rose leans near the open window, and thrushes play at voices. A husband runs headlong toward the river, while over his shoulder the cottage window brackets the wife's face in an attic room. Drapes stir, then she's gone, as each promise he does not keep drifts down past the walls, along the paths to the sea, there where children and old women heap up driftwood and dried seaweed. And here is, so please it, where I am loved. There are such Spartas. And so I want to thank you guys. It's a beautiful afternoon, and I came and you guys have helped me a lot anyway. It feels not so lonely in all of it. And I can't wait to hear Claire is a poet I really admire. Glad to be reading with her. And thanks for my host. It's too bad Katie can't be here. And I'll just leave you on this. The last poem in the new book my publisher would want me to tell you that it's called Day for Night. It came out a couple months ago. Envoy, sorry. I will read to you from the book of forthcoming, a text in variations, an index to ask of what you meant to answer, but then was gone like a breath or a hope. Before there was any of this, there was you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you to Richard Deming, to Kimberly McGuire, and now back by popular demand. This is true. If you were here last month, you got to hear Matt Falkowski, and people liked him so much they said, "Can he come back again?" And so he's here. Matt is a singer and a songwriter, and he's 18 years old. He studies at the Greater Hartford Academy of Performing Arts, and is working now on an EP, which is called Elegy. And welcome back, please, Matt Falkowski.
Is this good right here? Yeah. I think so. This first song is called Cold Blue Lips. songs. I kind of joke about that song. I call it a salad song because I just wrote it about like a million things. So I just took a little bit of this, took a little bit of that, made a song. That sounded very pretentious. This next song is called Elegy. This song is about a very close friend I had. If we're capable of it. This song is about a very close friend I had who took her own life a couple years ago. So this is Elegy. It's moments like these you don't catch in a photograph. If I don't try to well, I don't need that Polaroid camera to make the time stand still. When I pass all the storm clouds, I know my paths across, sailing down, following the stars to home. I was sure I had gotten lost. I'm a ship sinking these open waters. It's empty in these seas, descending into blackness like the wind. I've got a girl, you better leave. The ship is not your entity. Climb the sail, close your eyes. If you look underwater, you'll find me alone. Don't swim down into the void for your mind. It's nothing quite like home. I'm a ship sinking these open waters. It's empty on these seas, descending into blackness like the wind. I call a little girl, you better leave. The ship is not your enemy. Come and sail, close your eyes. We're falling deeper. You're fading out a little bit. Let me help you. I'm begging you. Tell me how. I don't know how. I'm a ship sinking in these open waters. It's empty in these seas, descending into blackness like the void I cover. I can bear to set you free, 'cause this is not a remedy. She says we found serenity, but this is not your remedy. She falls under grass, little girl, don't you ask. It's moments like these I'm catching a photograph. So, this last song I'm going to play was written for a close friend of mine that also passed away a year ago. Some dark subject matter. Did your mother play notes up?
Matt Falkowski. Thank you, Matt. And speaking of music, the two wonderful musicians that you heard coming in and whom you will hear after the reading have been with us for 5 or 6 readings now, I think. Pavel Kostik on guitar and Miguel Johnson on saxophone. They sound great. So I'm very happy to introduce Claire Rossini. Claire's third collection, Lingo, was published by the University of Akron Press, and Claire's poems and essays have appeared in numerous journals, including the Paris Review, the Kenyon Review, Iowa Review, Plowshares, Poetry, and in online publications like Drunken Boat and Poetry Daily. And several textbooks and anthologies, one called Visiting Wallace, Poems Inspired by the Life and Writing of Wallace Stevens. Claire has received fellowships from the Connecticut Commission on the Arts, the Minnesota State Arts Board, and the Maxwell Shepherd Foundation and the Bush Foundation. And Claire is currently the artist in residence in the English department at Trinity. My friend, Claire Rossini.
Thank you, John and Carol and Rennie and all who have worked to put this wonderful series of events together, to the folks at the Metro, and to Kimberly and Matt. What was it? When you walked on water, have you ever tried to run? Very nice. And Richard, what a wonderful reading. So thanks to all. So like Richard, when I started thinking about this reading, it's so close to the traumatizing events of November, what was it, the 8th? And we woke on the 9th. I put together a really series of really dark poems, and I thought, well, that won't do, so I tried to thread in some that weren't quite so bleak. So I'm just going to read a couple from each of my books and then some new work, and release you to this afternoon in the continuation of music and food and all good things. Here's actually a poem I've never read aloud as far as I can remember. It's from my first book, actually my second book, first full-length collection called Winter Morning with Crow. And I'm from Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes, as the license plates say. Actually, it's more like 15,000, I guess. But so I spent a lot of time fishing in rowboats growing up. So some of this poem comes out of that experience. But also, I've had the pleasure of living with a painter for so many years, my husband Joe Byrne, and this poem is really about having an opportunity to watch Joe's paintings kind of grow and develop over time, and I suppose it's also about just writing as well, or any kind of art making. It's called The Painter Goes Fishing, and at the end there's a reference to a line from Genesis, the first book in the Judeo-Christian Bible. God is always floating around, very intimate with us in those times, I guess, or at least in the imagination of the writers of Genesis. And he periodically would call down from the clouds to Abraham and say, "Abraham, Abraham," and Abraham would say, "Here I am." And I just always loved that little exchange. God was kind of tweeting, I guess, from the clouds. So the painter goes fishing. When the tip at the end of your rod scribbles frantically on the air, when that whole length of nervous fiberglass bends to the blankness of water, beseeching it, you struggle to your feet, most in love with this business now, when it first comes into view. That mute metallic shape wending its way up toward you through the wavering fields of water, now when it could be fish or angel. You don't know. You've just come to an unmarked place in readiness. You standing now, straining to hold your violent rod, like Abraham to his God, crying out, "Here I am," as the surface breaks in a shower of light. So in the middle of this book, which seems, so long ago, is a series of poems about a young woman, a painter, who was living, as I was at the time, in a small Midwestern town. And she gets an opportunity to travel to Europe and goes around and visits museums and so on. And in the poem is are references to a painting, a small late Renaissance painting that I have in my head that I saw long ago at some museum whose name I don't recall, but I remember the painting very clearly. I think it was maybe in Venice, but it's a painting in which the painter was kind of showing off his ability to follow the laws of perspective, to create depth in the painting surface. It's a landscape, so there's a little fisher guy in the foreground, and then this landscape very neatly ordered, and honing in on the what's it called, vanishing point at the back of the painting. So I say it's Dutch here, so maybe at the time I wrote this I remembered that much. It's called The Pleasures of Perspective. And I suppose it's about the consolation of art, which is something we have now. I think we're going to need more than that, though, as we move ahead. The pleasures of perspective. She's about to leave the gallery, its faded walls and dirty skylight, when a small Dutch landscape near the door catches her eye. Here, at last, a world run by rules. They insist that the castle being closer necessarily dwarfs the distant perfect city. In the foreground's fisherman, the calm lines of his back suggesting a fisherman's happiness, is largest of all. She could linger near the fisher, tossing stones into his black-green lake, but why not go on? There are more views beyond this one, more sails tipped toward home, and in the overlapping hills, spires point to a dozen heavens. There, where the river flows toward a final mountain, where the landscape hones to the vanishing point, she finds the room and hour where memory begins. The windows transfusing morning light, the cool floor, not even her father risen. And here's a poem, the last I'll read from this early book. It was originally titled An Imaginary Tapestry. Actually, it was originally titled Ideology. Then in the book it's called An Imaginary Tapestry because that's what's depicted in the book, one of those kind of Renaissance tapestries you see on the walls of museums. And then I've gone back to the original title in the last year and calling it Ideology again. So, ideology. Bushes, flowers, birds half camouflaged by leaves, their wings flickering like the needle's motion as it dipped in and out. All of this frames the clearing where a peasant couple dances mirthfully, their hands clasped above them, their cheeks rounded by clusters of reddish knots that burn with the blood risen hotly from their invisible tapestried hearts. Move back a step and it comes into view. a single gold thread running through midway up, a clear-belled note. It smites like the shrill voice of conscience. Inorganic, incongruous, it remains on the surface, glinting and vaguely perverse. A slip-up, perhaps, but it's gold and so obvious. See how the eye returns to it, how the mind in its study grows more formal, ready to forsake the dancing couple, the birds in the bush, the castle floating on a background hill, its airy turrets lost in a bevy of threadbare clouds. Now it is all that you see. See how it glitters, grows irresistible in this otherwise beautifully faded world. So there's some poems in my third volume, Lingo, that are set in Hartford. I moved here from the Midwest around 2000 and immediately fell in love with this small city. I've been living, you have to understand, in a small Midwestern town, a great little college town, but the town motto was cows, colleges, and contentment. So that gives you a picture. And being from Minnesota, I knew, it was good. I've since learned it's better for me to be at a distance from the place I love. I really do love Minnesota, but it was also good to be elsewhere. So one of the things that was going on when I moved to Hartford, and some of you may remember this, a young boy, 14 years old, had been shot in the back by a policeman as he was running through the park. His name was Auckland Solomon. And there was a big controversy about it at the time. I was very moved by the story of this. I'm not here to place blame. I know the police officer who shot him, is grieved about it. Well, enough said about that. It was a tragedy and also, a huge sorrow for the community here when it happened. So the poem is called A Hartford Collage. I guess there are a lot of poems about art making here today. And I begin by imagining someone putting together a collage, kind of abstract collage of Hartford things. So, a Hartford collage. A Hartford collage should include a stretch or two of canvas bare as the vacant lots where the houses of crack once stood. A slew of bright stripes for the ponchos and El Serape's windows, home to the best enchiladas in town. Gold leaf, just a tad, enough to suggest the Capitol's dome, its patrician angle of shine. And would it behoove us to render a handful of heavy gray squares for the temples of insurance? The man in the pinstriped suit nods yes. But embedded, please, in a swath of green, balmy as Bushnell Parks. What to do with the kid shot in the back last month by a cop as the kid ditched a borrowed caddy, a gun-shaped toy in his hand. For weeks, the TV's photons have glowed his serious eyes. Is there room for the dead in this urban piece? Or at least a rather slim, fresh-faced ghost? A sawed-off moon is making its way up from the suburbs to the east, home to the well-pruned hedge and the brass-plated door. Let's make this a night piece, a thin wash of moonlight holding us all lightly together. Temples and copse, stripes and gold leaf, suburban hedge and the beautiful dead kid whose eyes, whatever we brush over them, keep bleeding through. So that's to the memory of Auckland Salmon. And I'm going to finish with 4 new poems. Oh, I guess I have 5. One's relatively short. They're all short. So, whatever. Okay.
Tell us about the new phone.
Oh gosh. Well, they're I don't know what they're going to become, honestly. There's some memory poems. There's actually the collection I'm currently sending out has a lot of poems about climate change in it, but these particular poems are kind of post that group of poems. So, yeah, well, you tell me about them after I read them. How about that? Okay. I'll start with this one, which is about a memory from graduate school days. It's called Less Mind. As he drove me home from class, my teacher said I needed less mind in my art. The mind, that gray caveat, reason's sober valet. Well, I remember thinking, if not the mind, what will stitch the words together, get the socks on, raise a flashlight against the star-deviled sky? If I could now, I'd ask that man who, let it be said, also flirted with me, what he was really after. My heart touched in chalky red as a painter might. My soul, that bit of lace stitched to a tea towel. Or was it only my small unguarded breasts he wanted to coax into the light, as if they were a way back to his own redacted tenderness? Dylan, horse on the creaking cassette. Eyes to the road, I watched a leafless tree blur by, its rain-black branches raking the milky dusk. So here's one titled The Brain of the Heart. It's a well-known fact in certain circles that the heart is lined with neural cells. Some go so far as to say that this explains everything. Why, for instance, you gripped my hand as I told you about my betrayal. We drove, the two of us, through small mountains toward a coast of shuttered houses, ragged palms. Even then, in the off-season, we found grinding waves, buffoonish gulls stalled above in heavy wind. Some things just go on. Books get read. Glaciers melt. Terribly sad young people strap bombs to their bodies, blotting out the sun with a wash of blood. And yet, the cells lining the heart, thinking without ideology or blame, answering questions and asking questions and answering them without words, speaking instead with hands, mouths, and the small private sea two bodies make as they hold one another, rocking, rocking. dear sweet little brother Tony, who passed away a year and a half ago, had that cruel illness. All terminal illnesses are cruel, of course, in their own way, but he had early onset Alzheimer's, and he was quite a young man when he died. So this poem is based on a memory of visiting him in the institution he ended up in with my sisters, my one sister actually, Mary. It's called Alzheimer's Unit. Because Tony has gone nocturnal, knocking into walls, fingering doorknobs, staring blankly at the TV until the first gray light edges into the common room, sending him back to his doze. Because, damn it, it's September, the day's savage with sunshine, the cloud-tufted Midwestern sky so deep and blue, one almost drowns in it. Mary gently shakes Tony. I stroke his hand until he shudders, blinks, looks up to us, squinting. We're not sure he knows us, but the nurse, bless her, always says, Tony knows love. Then, Mary on one side, I on the other, we raise Tony up from his chair, wrap our arms around his back, clasp his hands in our hands, and thus knit, stride out the coated doors into a breeze that bears down with an unseasonable chill. Tony grinning through his grimace as we wheel off the curb, Tony sniffling and chortling as the three of us stagger down the drive. And it seems that these first bright leaves are strewn before us, so like Agamemnon, we trample on the red, our sheer pleasure, a hubris we'll remember as winter comes on. But Tony's laughing outright, that strange gurgling laugh of his. Tony's looking sideways at clouds as we, an us creature, sway and stumble into the fall. So two more. My sweet and only child went off to college. Well, now it's been a year and a half ago or so. So we went through all that stuff you go through, the old emptiness syndrome, as it's called. So this poem came out of that. Tony Francis, Tony's my brother. Francis, my dear son, is a big baseball player, still playing. The absence. For years there were bodies enough to warm these rooms, voices enough to render air. On TV, men played baseball night after night. Together we watched, bathed in the soft white glow of the homer. You were 3, then 12. Your height slowly darkened doorways, your body sprouted hair where you'd once been smooth. How many balls through the hoop, tears consigned to the pulp of sagging pillows. We were charmed, unnerved, as you betrayed your wholly human story. At first, your absence seemed scattered, like a weather one moment, then a sound humming in the walls. Had it been here all along, the seed from which night sprouted and leaved? The sock trapped under the bed, feathered in dust, the ball half buried in the garden, molting its leather hide. We live among artifacts and signs. You've cashed out, vamoosed, gone like a train plundering a horizon, loosing its tremulous horn. But we had you a while, didn't we? And we held, yes, we held. may be too sentimental, huh? Oh, come on. Oh, come on. Okay, so the last one.
Risk it.
This last one is set at the Rubin Museum of Art. I don't know if anyone's been there, but it's a wonderful museum on 17th, West 17th in New York City. It's dedicated to the art and culture of the Himalayas and India and neighboring regions. And there's an amazing a Tibetan Buddhist shrine room there that's set up as if it were a shrine room in a pretty well-off household. All the statues and devotional objects that you'd find in such a room. It's a wonderful place to go, and in front of it is an area where people can sit or kneel and meditate. So this poem is dedicated to the person who took me there several times, Jean Valentine, a poet. At the Buddha Shrine Room. How kind of you to bring me to that place, hallowed with statues of gold-leaved men with broad grins and round bellies. Each in his own way alluded to the breath predating wind. Bowls and vajras, prayer beads, conch, trumpets, horns and reeds, flickering butter lamps, you on the floor at my side. How was it silence sparked and swelled, grew as flames do, living? We were there together. Breathing took us in. How kind to show me all you knew and how you knew it. Sitting, palms together, eyes closed. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I'd like to thank one more time Claire Rossini, Richard Deming, Kimberly McGuire, Matt Falkowski, Pablo Kostic, and Miguel Johnson. Also, many thanks to Leon for allowing us to come to the Metro for this series. And congratulations again to David Leff, the newest poet in residence from the Connecticut Forest and Park Association, and your formal induction will be November 29th in Rockfall. And gratitude to my colleagues in the West End Poetry Society, Randy McWilkin. What? Oh yes. Oh, there's a handout. David has a handout here about the CFPA Poet Laureate induction. And thanks to Rennie and Joanne Bauer and Katie Irish, who usually does the emceeing if she feels better soon. And we invite you to join us on January 21st for the first reading of the new year, and that reading will feature Joanne Bauer and Patricia Mottola. And I'll leave you with this. I was thinking after Lonnie Black's tremendous memorial service the other evening, and then today seeing so many of the same faces here, that it seems to me that that's a powerful reminder of how those of us who are artists and those of us who support the arts need to support and love and help each other out, perhaps now more than ever. So thank you so much for coming. I'll see you in January.
Thank